Labguy here. Before we begin today's video, I have a confession to make. Camera 7 was partially operational the night before I shot the last video. It had vertical scan failure, which in a Vidicon camera you can recognize on the monitor as a series of vertical lines of the same line of video being repeated, because the Vidicon camera is only scanning across the middle of the tube. The vertical has collapsed. So that's the symptom. Vertical lines that when you move the camera, the lines do move, and you can tell that it is partially the image in front of you. So that's number one. I changed all the capacitors in that camera that evening, and before I started, the camera worked, and when I was done, the camera did not work. It was dead, Jim. Before we get into the procedure of replacing the capacitors, I want to show you the proper technique for opening the cartridge television camera for servicing. There are a couple of gotchas that will get you if you don't do it right. Let's get into that part right now. To get into the camera, there are 4 screws on the bottom that we remove. Here and here, here and here. These will release the side panels, which are screwed at the bottom and clipped at the top. So there's some wiggling to do to get these off. So let's begin. Alright, the panels are loose, they tilt up, and then they have, well, this one's broken, this one side's gone, but they have these little clips that hook onto the plastic bar on the top, or metal bar, I don't know. It clips under here. Alright? The other side comes off the same way. You open it and pull upward on it. Upward in the case that the camera is upside down. And the 2 panels come off. Conveniently, the controls are marked on the inside of both panels. Another confession, until just now, I had never seen this. I've worked on these over the years. I have never noticed this. Okay, moving right along. We'll come back to those later. So the next thing, if you're servicing the camera, you're going to need to get the 2 circuit boards out. Now, here's where the gotcha gets ya. This stupid button on the top has a light bulb inside of it. For those of you who don't know, a light bulb is a Stone Age version of an LED. So you need something pointy, and you pry this button out like this and pull it out. Don't lose it. And then if you have tiny fingers, you can reach down in there and turn that light bulb, but you have to remove the light bulb. I would say that if you're not going to use this with an actual Cartrivision videotape recorder, don't put the light bulb back. It's part of the trigger circuit for starting and stopping the tape recorder, and therefore if you're not using the trigger circuit, you don't need the lamp. And if you're going to grab the bulb with pliers, be gentle, you don't want to break it. As you can see, it's a pain. It's a pain to get this little guy out. Thanks, Mr. Edison. Okay, now that's out of the way. That will allow this circuit board to swing outward now. Otherwise, the bulb is sticking up in this hole and will block you from pulling the boards out. So, the first board to come out is the one with the shield. You will need a straight blade screwdriver. A small straight blade screwdriver. There are 1, 2, 3 small screws here, here, and here. And then there are 2 larger screws here and here. These are 2 power transistors that are bolted to this cast aluminum chassis for a heatsink. They are insulated. They have a mica washer under them. Be aware of that. And those 2 screws have a plastic insulating washer on them as well. Don't lose those washers. Don't lose those micas. So first let's take out the small screws. The screws have star washers on them to make contact with the ground plane. This one and this one do. The one on the bottom edge has a brass contact attached to a wire and no washer. So you'll have 3 screws and 2 washers. Don't lose them. That's 3 small screws. All right. Now, the next 2 screws are the ones on these power transistors. And we loosen them. I like to use tweezers to pull this kind of stuff out. So there he is. He's got heat sink grease on him and a washer. Plastic washer, don't lose it. Very important that you keep these transistors insulated from the chassis. Beneath them is a thin sheet of mica. Another one is identical to the first one. And they will have that white silicone grease on them. Now, this board can be raised up, but will run into the problem of reaching the ends of its leads, and so at this point we'll leave it like this. Now, the mica washer for the heat sink is sticking to the chassis. Just leave it there if it's going to stay on its own. The other one down here is stuck to the transistor, so don't lose it. I'm going to actually take it off of the transistor and put it aside. I have to remember to put that back. Now, the next board on the other side has to come out so that, no, I'm incorrect. This board, the first board, can come out. We have to remove the connector, the interboard connector right here, and you just pry it off with a screwdriver like that. Alright, I'm mostly correct. There's another wiring harness that attaches to this board the same way as that. So, we now take out these screws. Again, pay attention to where the washers are. The washers will be on the holes that ground circuit board trace to the chassis. If there's no circuit board trace, then there's no need for the star washer. So the 2 back screws here do not have washers on this board. So you'll end up with 3 of the small screws with washers and 3 of the screws without washers. There we go. That's loose. Now, the same deal, there's another connector right here. We pry it up with our screwdriver. The pins for that connector are soldered to the circuit board itself right here. You can see them. Now, there's a access hole here that this harness goes through, and if you push it out, you'll see the other board come out. Just put the connector through the hole. Carefully. Now, the last two wires are the Vidicon target and the Vidicon ground, the yoke can ground. And they are attached to two pins here in the middle of the board. We use needle nose pliers to pull them off carefully off of the pins. Just so. Now, this board is free, and these two wires are right here, and the other board comes out on its wires like this. So they're both fully accessible now for servicing. I have already changed the capacitors at this point, and they're hard to see. So now let's go to the capacitor changing videos so that you can see how I changed those. And I want to point out that the one blue capacitor here is not changed because it's rated 63 volts, and I didn't have anything like that. I don't think that's the cause of the board failure though. So moving right along, enjoy the capacitor change video, and then I'll be back to wrap it up. The capacitors are axial, meaning the leads come out the ends. All I have are radials, which are the kind with two leads coming out the bottom. We'll just have to make them fit. So I'm starting at this end with four 22 microfarad 6 volt capacitors, which I will replace with four 22 microfarad 25 volt capacitors, which I think, if they're not smaller, they're at least the same size, and we'll just have to get creative bending their leads around. So here we go. The first four capacitors. Oh, this is going to be so much fun! The camera was made by UMIG in Austria in the 1970s, and they broke the cardinal rule of bending the leads over sharply when they put them in the holes so that the part wouldn't fall out, which just makes unsoldering them hard as hell. So let's start with that one, and we'll take it from there. Okay. Ow, something's hot. What I'm doing is working the lead loose. Okay, that one's not unsoldered. Oh, God damn. We're having fun now, Stimpy. Ooh, that sucker's getting hot. Where is the X-Acto knife? So I can bend the leads up. Alright. We're getting there. Alright. Yep, he fell out. Great. Okay, good news. The polarity is marked on the board. This first one is C203. Not very dang big, is he? But he is pretty old. He's old enough to vote. Alrighty. That is 22 microfarads. 22 microfarads. 16 volts. Oh, even better. Second bin. All right. Here we go. The new one. But you see the leads come out the bottom, and I have to bend them around so that one goes one way, one goes the other. So let's see, plus and minus. If he stood up, no. We'll bend the minus lead under because I think it's ground. Okay. You got to measure these things carefully so that they fit in the holes. I like my work to look good. Okay. Now we've made a radial into a axial. And we place him in. Oh, that's not too shabby. And we just hook the legs. We don't bend them over viciously. That way, in 25, 30, 40 years, and the next guy changes these capacitors, it won't be such a bear. Alright. There we go. Snip, snip. Okay, next. Okay, and this fella here is a 150 microfarad at 25 volts. That I don't think I have. I have a 100 or I have a 220. A 100 and a 47 would do the trick. Together. We've got an inductor in here with some of the thinnest wires I've ever seen. Okay. I think I want to change this smaller capacitor first. So, one capacitor to go, but I'm going to have to use two parts to make it up. I'm going to have to use a 100 and a 47. I'm replacing a 150, and I don't know if the value is critical, but I know if I keep bending this inductor back and forth, it's going to break off, and this looks like an impossible to replace part. Okay, so 100. 150 at 16 volt, no, 25 volts. So I need a 100 at 25 volts. What the heck's going on here? Okay. And a 47 at 25 volts. Okay, both of these can stand up, I'm almost certain. I'm going to lay them down, I think laying them down makes sense. I'm not sure I can get both leads. So, what we're going to do, that one up. This one's short. I see. It wants to play. Oh, alright, don't burn that. Okay. Alrighty, I think that could work. Two capacitors paralleled to form the 150 that we need. It's a 100 and a 47, which should be close enough. Make sure I got minus to minus, plus to plus. Our minus end goes that way. Oh, that's good. Wow. Yeah, it drops right in too. Huh. There we go. All right, all the capacitors are changed on the board. Well, of course you can't see it. There. Frame it up good. There you go. Take your time, hit your pause button to have a good look. I'll point out the capacitors. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm going to scream, 6, 7, and 8. There you go. Board number 2, I believe. Maybe it's board number 1. I don't know. Board number 2 in the Cartrivision camera. .47 at 4 volts. 47 at 10. 1, 2. No. And make sure you get them in there the right way. other than this one blue one, which is a 63 volt cap, which I don't have, I've managed to change all of them. And you can't see them very well because they're black. They're in here. So all the caps on board number 1 are changed. Now we have to put the shield back on. And he goes right, oh, here. Oh, I see, they give me a nice convenient plastic post. Oh, that's very nice. Nicely. Ow! Hot. Okay. There we go. On there nicely. Where's our plastic? Plastic goes under here. Right. Like that. Right there. Click. And it's in place. Okay, looks like this needs to move down just a little. And we can get in there. Okay, shield's back on. Soldered here and down here. Very good. What else do I need? Nothing. Okay, so we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 capacitors there. 2, 4, 6, 8 on the other board, from the other board. Now we get to put this camera back together in the reverse order. Here's the camera body. Hard to see inside. Alright. Now, before we can put this board back in, we have to feed the cable from this board through the hole. And this one goes this way. So this one goes... Okay. See this thing sticking up right here? That will be your nightmare if you try to take your camera apart. I'll show you that when we do the disassembly. You'll also see it in the reassembly. But remember that sticking up, that round thing, that square thing with the round hole. Drove me crazy. Okay. Now the first thing is there are two wires here, a yellow and a green. These are the vertical deflection coil. And they have to reconnect to 2 pins on here, right down here. Oh boy. Did I write down where they go? Yeah. ST4, Roman numeral, is the green wire. Okay. Got it. Yellow wire hooks to 5. Oh, we're having fun now. Turn it around. Okay, those are reconnected. Now this connector here has to feed through a hole inside the case here. Thus. Then you're going to find, and I don't know how to show you this, we'll zoom in where we can. I don't know if you can see it. There's this brass wire right here. See the two rivets and the little wire spring? They form a switch that the push button on the top of the camera presses. So you got to make sure those are properly oriented. This connector goes on here. Like that. And now we start trying to worm this thing back in. The other connector we fed through the hole, which you can't see, back here. Ow! I hate this headset. I wish I could see. It plugs onto the pins up here. We're having fun now, aren't we, Stimpy? We sure are, Ren. Okay. Now that's plugged back in. Okay, this board is happy where it's at. Let's put his screws back. There are 3 screws holding this board. And they're straight head screws. So you need a small straight head screwdriver. 2 of them do not have washers, and 1 of them does. The one that does penetrates through a trace, which is ground, connecting this circuit board ground to the metal cabinet. Make sure you get the washer in the right place. These screws look heavily anodized, and they may or may not be conductive. I don't know. The 2 screws without washers go in the holes that don't have traces. Alright, so this board is now going to be bolted in. There. He's in. These wires seem to be happy right there. Now we can flip it over. And this board needs to be installed. And he has the 2 power transistors. One right here and one under here. And they have to line up with their holes. Okay. And of course, in manhandling the board, I've got them all out of whack. Oh, I see that this one, oh boy, yeah, they both, I didn't even notice, both have mica insulators. Wow. That was close. Okay. They both have a mica insulator, and you must have that insulator under there. Okay. They use the large screws, and you can tell them because they have the white heatsink paste on them as well. And I install these first. Before I put in the board screws. They also have a plastic insulation washer. So, let me get this guy. There it goes. Make sure that insulated washer is in the right place. There we go. Ah! There we go. Now the two power transistors are reconnected to the die-cast chassis. The chassis is a casting. It's an aluminum casting that's been either painted or anodized. Okay, now we get to put the screws in. On this board, there are two screws with star washers and one without, which I see is trying to run away. And oh, no, they should all three have star washers. Maybe. Okay, we'll put the first one in at the front. Of course, I tightened down the transistors, didn't I? Okay, there we go. Don't tighten them all the way down. Now the one at the front has a star washer. The one at the back on top has a star washer. And I'll show you the difference. The last one has no washer, but it's an equally important ground point. Getting these started can sometimes be a booger. There we go. So on the last one there's no washer, but down here at that point where it goes, there is a brass lug that you have to bring up. That's the green wire that is soldered to the outside case of the yoke, of the Vidicon yoke. And you got to make sure that it connects to the ground on the circuit board as well. And when you get it in, tighten it up, go around, tighten all the screws. And we are not done yet. Now, the camera should be possible to operate at this point for testing, and I will certainly do that next. But remember the hole in the top for the button. It has a little tiny light bulb that screws in. You might be able to unscrew it with a piece of heat shrink tubing slipped over it, because it's really hard to get your fingers in there. There's the bulb screwed into the socket. The red cover goes on it. And if you look down in here, you'll see the brass wire that makes up the contact. Make sure you get that in there correctly if you're going to use this with a Cartrivision recorder, because this is your record start stop button. This is camera number 7, and when I started it had vertical scan failure. Chances are very good that it still does. We'll see. I'm going to power it up and test it next. So that is how you replace the 17 capacitors in the Cartrivision cameras. In the next video we'll troubleshoot this camera and see if we can repair it, and we'll do a deep dive into the schematics at that time. So I want to say welcome to all the new subscribers. I want to say greetings to all of the current subscribers, and congratulate you all if you've made it this far through the video for toughing it out. I know this was another Watch Labguy Work video, and I apologize for those, but I hope that by watching me work you can pick up some techniques. It's not necessarily the art of repairing the cameras per se, as in tool use and soldering and dealing with the issues that come up. and also to see how relatively easy it is to replace components in a device that looks intimidating, at least at first, until you become familiar with it. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you know anyone else who likes this subject matter, be sure to let them know about my videos. And until next time, Lab Guy out.